afternoon and welcome to our webinar series, Minorities and COVID-19. That's the ninth episode of our webinar series organized by Eurac and the Institute for Minority Rights. The topic today is economy, minorities and COVID-19. So we will speak about border regions, we will speak about Schleswig-Holstein, the Danish-German border region, we will speak about Carinthian, the Slovene-Carinthian border region. And we have also participants who have a more institutional approach. So we have experts from the OSCE and from our institute, the General Secretary of MIDAS. My name is Günther Rautz. I'm the director of the Institute for Minority Rights, and we will start our 9th episode of the webinar series, Minorities and COVID-19. Today's topic is economy, minorities and COVID-19. I'm repeating it now because, and this is some introductory remarks, that we are online on Zoom. So people who registered on Zoom follow us on Zoom, but there's also the possibility to follow on our Facebook account. My colleague Katharina Krepatz is moderating the chat room. So if you have questions and you are participating on Zoom, you can put questions. She will summarize the questions, and please address the questions to a single expert or to the audience. Not to the audience, also to the audience if you want to chat with other colleagues in the chat, or you can address also all our experts. Johanna Mitterhofer is another colleague. She's the administrator for the Facebook and also for the Zoom. So thank you, Johanna and Katharina. Now I'm going to introduce our experts. First of all, we have Josefine Bellmann as first speaker. She holds a bachelor degree in business administration and modern languages from the University of Flensburg and the University Sunderberg, so a German-Danish border program. Since 2018, she works for the Chamber of Commerce in Flensburg, and she's responsible for the German-Danish regional management. The second speaker is Valentin Inzko. He's an Austrian diplomat currently serving as the 7th High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina. He's member of the Slovenes in Carinthia, and there in Carinthia is also head of the National Council of Carinthian Slovenes, so head of the Rautz der Kärntner Slovenen. So it's one of these associations which represent the Carinthian Slovenes. Our third speaker is Elżbieta Kuzborska-Pacha. She's a legal advisor to the OSCE High Commission on National Minorities. She was Senior Minority Fellow at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. She was also previously a lecturer at the University of Białystok in Vilnius. Welcome also to you. And finally, last but not least, my Eurac colleague Marc Röggla. He's General Secretary of the European Association of Daily Newspapers in Minority and Regional Languages. He was also responsible for the South Tyrolian Convention. And he will speak a little bit less about South Tyrol, but more about MIDAS and what MIDAS is doing and what are the challenges of minority newspapers. So the first two speakers, they have more a regional approach, and I will give the floor immediately to Josefine Bellmann to explain a little bit how is the situation in the German-Danish border region and what are or what have been the challenges of the last weeks. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a very interesting topic and a very interesting group of speakers as well. So I'm keen to answer all the questions, hopefully I can. But I would just like to give you a short or brief overview of the situation here in the German-Danish border region, which is anyhow a very special one since we have a very good relationship between the two countries and the minorities in both countries, a very peaceful one, which I think is very exceptional for border regions in general. And to say that, of course, the German-Danish border region lives from open borders, also economically. We have a very close link between the both economies on both sides in the area of the Jutland corridor, we call it here. And this, of course, is dependent on cross-border traffic without any barriers and obstacles, especially for all the companies that sit here or have their sites here in Germany and Denmark, respectively. Germany is Denmark's largest export market and Denmark's most important partner in Europe. Approximately 15 billion US dollar in value have been exported from Denmark to Germany in 2019. So this is a major market. It's also the only land border Denmark shares with one EU country. So we have approximately 14,500 commuters crossing the border every day to reach their workplace in Denmark or Germany respectively, whereas we have to be honest, there's only about like 1,000 going from Denmark to Germany and all the rest is going the other way around, which is for the first place because of the very good salary in Denmark, and so it's more southern to northern commuting and not the other way around. But anyway, we have a lot of people living here on the one side of the border, working on the other side, very popular, and they were all affected of the closed borders, of course. On 14th March, Denmark was one of the first countries in Europe to close its borders to fight COVID-19. And since then, tourists and other foreigners without specific entry reason recognized by Denmark, also very important, have not been able to enter the country. Yeah, what is the specific entry reason? This is what we discussed here in the past a lot. I would like to come to this back later. But first, I would like to point out the economical facts, which are the main part of this webinar today. So our region is very much dominated by tourism, renewable energies, and of course the retail, the individual retail in the smaller cities, which all depend on, of course, tourism also from Germans and Danes in their own country. So we have a lot of visitors here from Germany and Schleswig-Holstein, and of course from Denmark. So the regional trade, the retail, the tourism, and the whole hospitality industry in particular have suffered from the border closure. And yeah, what's interesting in this regard to point out, and also important for me to point out, is that the situation of the Danish minority in Germany, and also the other way around, is basically no different from that of the majority population. So there's no disadvantage towards the minorities, which is why we have a very, very friendly relationship between both. And I found a quote of the General Secretary of the SSF. This is the Süd-Schleswig Vereinigung, which is the organization of the Danish minority in Germany. And he said, as a Danish minority, we are pleased that politicians in the Danish parliament have listened. It is also gratified that the special arrangement will also apply to the majority population in border countries. This shows that we can achieve positive results together and through an objective and good dialogue. And this, he said, according to the decision of States Minister Mette Frederiksen in Denmark, who opened the borders on 15th June for the citizens of Schleswig-Holstein, so not only for the minorities, but for the majority population, citizens who live in Schleswig-Holstein, to cross the border without this good reason, which I mentioned in the beginning. And for other EU citizens, the border is not closed, but partly closed. They can only enter if they have a proof that shows that they have a minimum stay of 6 nights in Denmark. So then also people from Bavaria or other parts of the EU and Germany can travel. But we as people in Schleswig-Holstein, we can travel now again on a daily basis to shop, to go to the Danish beaches. And this was achieved throughout a very good dialogue between politicians and also organizations of the minorities, of course, but also because of a very good political dialogue we have here before COVID-19 already, and we have here in general. And that was, yeah, everybody was very pleased when this was announced finally. But before that, we had a lockdown for like 8 weeks where we couldn't cross the border. The only exception was some trading, and also for the commuters who had to go to work. But of course, also all the commuters, everybody had to work in home office, and of course they couldn't go to Denmark to work there and had to stay in Germany in their home offices. So they were also affected by the lockdown, like everybody else. So that was like the biggest discussion here to define that specific reason, because from a not economical point, we had a lot of couples, for example, or also divorced couples with children, where one part was living in Denmark and the other part was living in Germany, and they were actually not allowed to visit their children or visit their mother or brother, or like really close family relations, which are usually not affected by the border, because you can just travel back and forth, and who are really much affected by the border closure now, and couldn't see each other for a very long time. I think that maybe you have read it in the newspaper about that one very old couple who are both like 80, that old man and woman who met every day on the border and to drink a coffee together, and waved to each other from one side of the border to the other, and made it to newspapers even in America, and to the New York Times, and everybody read about that couple and their relationship story. Which was very romantic and emotional, but of course today we want to focus on the economical points, and yeah, I'm happy to answer questions, and I hope from my side that would be the first share.
Thank you, Josefine. When we prepared this webinar, we thought which regions we should choose, and we decided for Schleswig-Holstein and Carinthia also for one reason, because both regions had a referendum after World War I.
Yeah.
And also the Vienna State Treaty is from 1955, and your Bonn-Copenhagen Agreement is also from 1955. So very important benchmarks in history. And my question now to Strauke would be, how was the situation in Carinthia during COVID? I think I'm also from Carinthia, so I know that it was not similar to the Danish border, German-Danish border region. So there were maybe more restrictions than in Germany and Denmark. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about that, and what maybe are also the future challenges regarding COVID and the border region in Carinthia.
Actually, I would be very interested that you tell us how the situation was between Tyrol and Tyrol, you know, because there are very tight economic relations. But anyway, you asked me about Carinthia. It is true, we have had a referendum 100 years ago. It was a little bit unfortunate. It would be better that we would stay in Austria without referendum, because all these divisions are still very deep even today, although situation is improving. I would also like to stress one issue, which is not the case between Germany and Denmark. We have had here a communist state on our borders in Carinthia. This was Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had a Stalinist regime for the first 10 years or so. So we had in our village, for example, as an Iron Curtain, we had refugee streams, especially in winter, because in winter borders were not guarded so much. So we were very much happy when Slovenia became an independent state, when the borders were opened, really opened, you know. And there's a famous writer, he's Jančar, you know. He was in prison, for example, in Yugoslavia, just because he had a book which was a little bit more critical of Yugoslavia, yeah. Drago Jančar, the famous writer. But anyway, borders were opened, we were very happy, and this was really, yeah, a historic event, almost to be compared with the fall of the Berlin Wall, but in any case, very important, yeah. So recently, when borders were closed again, we were very upset, and especially we were upset because one important principle of European Union was violated, which says all citizens to be treated equal unless there is a solid ground, you know. And we have thought we are not being treated equal because Austrian borders to Germany and to Switzerland remained open, but the borders to Slovenia were not open. I speak now about month of May. We were protesting and so on and so on, and ultimately the borders were open again. Of course, they were always open, but you had to go into quarantine. If you went to Slovenia. This is not the case anymore. There's also this Article 17 of the Convention of National Minorities, that minorities have the right to establish and maintain free and peaceful contacts across frontiers, and this should not be prevented. Yeah, and we had the impression this was prevented. Also, as my previous speaker said, quite a few families couldn't travel to Slovenia, who had relatives there, funerals, etc. A special permission had to be obtained by the embassy for each case. But now the situation is better again. So we have now full freedom of movement based on Copenhagen, based also on the principles of OSCE, Article 32.4 and 32.6, very important for freedom of assembly, also cross-border. So now, about economic consequences, yeah. Cultural consequences were severe. We have professors in our music school. They are art directors for theater. We have a very lively, I don't know in English, Marionettentheater. Günther, can you help me? Marionette theater, yeah. They couldn't cross the borders. They couldn't come here regularly. So our cultural life came to a complete halt. Yeah, indeed. We're a small minority, but we still have over 1,000 cultural events every year. This came to a complete halt. There was not a single one, unless there were events in the internet. But as far as the economy is concerned, commuters were concerned most. And we have quite a few thousand workers working in Austria, especially in Styria. They are coming from southern Styria, which is in Slovenia, going to northern Styria, which is in Austria, with the capital of Graz. And many are coming also to Carinthian, to my province, and they got a special regulation. Between 5 and 8 in the morning, the borders were open to come to work. Yeah, they could come here, and in the evening, the border then closed, and then borders were opened again in the evening, so the workers could go back to Slovenia. I think apart from these workers who work in factories, the greatest maybe factor of restriction was in the area of consultancy, in the area of services. We have quite a few Austrians, Slovenians who work in Ljubljana, in Slovenia, in the service sector, like tax consultants, like banking employees, banking directors. There was a period when we had 3 banking directors in Slovenia coming from Austria. There was Volksbank, Bank Austria, and Kärntner Sparkasse, Carinthian Savings Bank. They all had directors from Austria. And if you travel from Klagenfurt to Ljubljana, it's about 1 hour by car. So quite a few of these people were commuting on a daily basis. Our figures as far as trade is concerned are not so big as between Denmark and Germany, but in relation, in percentage, you could say that our trade with Slovenia, between Austria and Slovenia, is even bigger. The Slovenians are the biggest buyers per capita. They are the biggest buyers of Austrian goods, and Slovenian market per capita is the biggest market everywhere. But even in absolute figures, Slovenia, for example, for Austria, is a bigger market than Japan. It's a bigger market than Scandinavia, and it's, I think, number 12 in the world. Obviously, Austria is exporting more to Germany. Austria is exporting more to Italy, but small Slovenia, with 2 million inhabitants, is our 12th biggest trade partner in the world. Of course, all these restrictions, all these measures affected our people also, as I said, especially in the service sector. And now we are quite happy that borders are open again for tourism, for cultural exchange, for the economy. And we hope that this will stay as it is, because as much as it was painful to have a communist regime in Yugoslavia, we easily accommodated to the new situation that borders are open. And I think people like to have open borders again. Thank you.
Thank you, Strauko. Yeah, maybe I can add, because you asked about South Tyrol. I think very important in South Tyrol was also this transporter cooperation, which is formalized with the EGTC, with the European Groupings of Territorial Cooperation. So we have a Euro region, North Tyrol, South Tyrol, and Trentino, and to have this institutional frame under the lockdown was really helpful, because there was also exchange between the hospitals. Also, the students were free to move. So South Tyrol students who were studying in Austria, in Innsbruck, they were able to come back. Also, the mask came from Austria to South Tyrol. So having this kind of formalized transporter cooperation, which also in Carinthia is working. There are 2 EGTCs. A new one is the Geopark Karawanken, which especially is working in this on the municipality level between
Border region.
On the border region between Slovenia and Carinthia. So the bilingual municipalities in Carinthia and the Slovenian municipalities in Slovenia on the border. So I think that's very helpful. But maybe also then Marc can add something on South Tyrol when he wants to speak about MIDAS. But first of all, I would ask Elżbieta for the first statement regarding the High Commissioner for National Minorities, whose mandate is special on socioeconomic issues. So this is one of his most important tasks. And you published also recommendations. So immediately after the lockdown, the High Commissioner published recommendations regarding minorities under COVID-19. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Thank you, Günther. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to discuss this significant topic of economic impact of COVID-19 on national minorities. And let me start with a general remark about the role of the international organizations and the OSCE in particular in the current situation. And this role is to assist states in better responding to COVID-19. And as we saw, the immediate response was concentrated naturally around healthcare issues. And currently we see a number of problems around socioeconomic exclusion that need to be addressed in a comprehensive manner. From the perspective of the OSCE HCNM's conflict prevention mandate, the economic participation of national minorities is an issue of integration. And similarly as integration, it must be approached holistically. And building on this very principal assumption, the economic inclusion and empowerment of members of national minorities are important for 3 main reasons. First of all, security argument, then economic prosperity argument, and anti-discrimination legal argument. And all these 3 arguments are directly related to the OSCE notion of comprehensive security, as it encompasses 3 distinct but interrelated dimensions: the political military, the economic and environmental, and the human dimension. And these dimensions, on the other hand, are integrated into different levels of security. First of all, collective security at international and regional levels, then national security, and very basic human security, including for members of majority and minority communities. And as you've mentioned in your introduction, taking this into account, in the very early stages of coronavirus crisis, the High Commissioner Lamberto Zanier issued recommendations on how governments could ensure inclusiveness of short-term and long-term responses to COVID-19. And these recommendations encourage states to streamline diversity in measures addressing the crisis across several policy areas, including access to opportunities for socioeconomic inclusion and participation. Among others, states are encouraged to take positive actions to mitigate the economic consequences of COVID-19. States are also encouraged to pay attention to socioeconomic situation of low-wage workers, informal laborers, and persons without access to identity documents or formal bank accounts. They are also encouraged to ensure that self-employed and small businesses are not disproportionately harmed. It is advisable to pay special attention to businesses operating in border regions and across borders in rural and remote areas. It was already mentioned by Josefine. It's also important to consider facilitating minority women's participation in the labor market. The participating states should also consider cooperating with private business sector to overcome the consequences of the crisis. Also to apply fiscal and budgetary policies equally to the needs of persons belonging to national minorities. And what is also important and relevant to the socioeconomic participation of national minorities is for authorities to communicate in all relevant languages, including in languages of national minorities. And here I would like to recall another set of the High Commissioner's recommendations dated back to 1999, the Lund recommendations on the effective participation of national minorities in public life. And they are now more topical than ever, as they present the holistic approach to participation I was referring to at the beginning. They can be used as guidelines in shaping long-term policies, policies that increase inclusiveness of national minorities, improve good governance, encompass political, economic, and social and cultural participation of national minorities. And actually, this leads me to another reflection on the interconnectedness of different levels of participation of minorities, of different levels of security, as I've mentioned, national, collective, and individual security, and different human rights of national minorities in general, how they are linked, how they are interconnected. This crisis, unfortunately, highlighted, for example, how lack of access to quality education limits employment options, how lack of political rights directly translates into limited economic opportunities. It also shows the importance of the language policy for our daily life. In other words, in addressing economic consequences of COVID-19 on national minorities, the governments must bear in mind long-term measures and policies that facilitate political, economic, and cultural integration of national minorities. And the OSCE, with its comprehensive approach to security, is well positioned to provide a platform for facilitating this dialogue, for sharing lessons learned and supporting cooperation. Actually, the High Commissioner Lamberto Zanier has concluded from his observations that many participating states has found effective ways to mitigate the disproportional socioeconomic risks for national minorities by implementing some good, some positive practices. And here I would like to share some of those with you. For example, disseminating information about the health risks of COVID-19 and economic compensation benefits in minority languages. Also engaging minority media and minority journalists to explain the quarantine measures to of the central authorities in minority regions and in minority languages. Also, governments provided distance learning and online education in minority languages in an accessible way, as well as secured the necessary IT equipment to most vulnerable groups as Roma communities, low-income families with several children. The other good practice involves transferring sufficient economic resources to the minority regions in order to enable decentralized local authorities to mitigate economic risks. Also, in this crisis, it's crucial for authorities to condemn discriminatory rhetoric, including in the media. So these practices are positive, and they could be seen as a starting point for some long-term policies that tackle social economic consequences of COVID-19. To sum up what was said, we must bear in mind that economic inclusion of national minorities can be crucial for security, prosperity, and development of a particular region, of a particular country. And greater economic opportunities, including for members of national minorities, help to break down divisions in society. It's important to bear in mind that sustainable economic participation is also a combination of different elements. It's often forgotten that minorities have their own ideas about their aspirations and goals. That's why the most effective way to address economic challenges we are facing with this crisis is to include members of national minorities into decision-making processes. This is it for my introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Elżbieta. You mentioned media, and I think media is very important. You have the responsibility of media now, especially now in this period of COVID-19. Fake news, some minorities were more discriminated than others, for example, the Roma minority. And I think media, they have a very important role when they spread informations and you mentioned also media training. Now, Marc is representing Association of Minority Daily Newspapers, and I would give the floor immediately to Marc that he maybe can explain a little bit what is MIDAS and what are the challenges your organization is facing now under COVID-19.
Yes, thank you very much, Günther, for having me, and thanks to my co-speakers. I guess everything you said is very true. But perhaps before I connect to the dots you already mentioned, I would like just to present very shortly MIDAS, what MIDAS is doing, how many members we have. So MIDAS was founded in 2001 because on an initiative of different editors-in-chief from different minority daily newspapers in Europe. And today we have 26 newspapers all over Europe from 10 different EU countries, plus one newspaper from Switzerland and one from Serbia. We cover 11 languages, and the main thing of our organization is to create a network for the newspapers, because as you can imagine, a lot of our newspapers can learn from each other because they have very similar challenges to tackle. So therefore our main main goal is to create a good network between them to help with technical issues, with journalistic issues, and so on. And of course, what we also do is to support our newspapers on a political and especially on the European level to receive more funding for the newspapers, but also to have a voice for minority newspapers. That's it. We have also study visit programs for young journalists, because it's also important that journalists get the chance to learn from each other, and also to learn the situation in different minority areas. So we have this exchange where normally once a year we visit a minority area in Europe, and our journalists get the chance to speak with of course, experts of this minority area, but also associations, politicians, so they get really some insights. What we also do is we are every year we are handing out 2 prizes. One is the MIDAS prize and one the Otto von Habsburg prize to journalists which are reporting on minority issues, because it's important, of course, also that especially in majority newspapers, journalists are also reporting on minority issues, which is not always the case. Now, I would like to go back to your question. What's the difficulty right now for our newspapers during COVID? And I would like to connect what Elżbieta very correctly said. The High Commissioner in his recommendations said that it would be important that national states also within their information of COVID-19 measures, they use not only the national language, but also minority languages. And as we know, this was not always the case. I would even go further and say this was very seldom the case. And as we saw in a lot of states, the translation or this communication in the mother tongue of minorities has been taken over not only by newspapers, but also by regional governments or associations. Like in our case in South Tyrol, of course, the translation has been done mostly by our regional government, but we have cases also within our network where only the minority newspapers were the only source to communicate COVID-19 measures in the minority language. And as you can imagine, especially when we have a time of crisis and when it's about health issues, it's very important for members of minorities to receive information in their mother tongue. And that's also why we saw that especially the work of minority newspapers in that case has been really, really important, and that they are really not only preservers of culture and of language, but also a very important source of information. I would like to finish my statement that also we saw during this COVID crisis that in most of the cases of our newspapers, readership, they got more readership when it comes to of course the online media, so the websites, but also when it comes to sales. A lot of our newspapers sold more newspapers than before when sales was possible, because I have to say that not in every state all the sale points were open, so also that was an issue. But the thing is that most of our newspapers are relying on advertisement sales, and of course advertisement dropped down significantly, as you can imagine, when everything is closed, no business is open, no events are made. Advertisement sales also dropped significantly, and that is the difficult situation from our newspapers, that although they are fulfilling this important work of communicating also COVID measures in the minority language. Also, if online, especially, there are more readers, the financial situation got worse and worse, and that is the dramatic situation right now for some of our newspapers, which are really struggling very hard right now. So that's it from my side for the first statement.
Thank you, Marc. I think that's also now the bridge for my second question. Also, Elżbieta mentioned economic help. So I know MIDAS, for some of your newspapers, you are trying also to ask financial help from the European Union funds. But let's go back to Flensburg, asking a representative from the Chamber of Commerce, how are you prepared for a second wave, for a second lockdown? Do you have any plans to help your small companies to survive maybe in autumn when coronavirus is back again? Hopefully not, but we don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. We just had today a general assembly, the first one, which was held live, where our CEO talked to us about more packages that are going to be released by our government to help small and medium-sized companies here in Schleswig-Holstein, and there will be a second package of help with I don't know, I think it's again millions of euro, but it just was announced today that we as the Chamber of Commerce will have 5 employees who will full-time be responsible to assist companies in filling out the forms to apply for more governmental aids. So we are totally involved in the process now. In the beginning, this was all new. We were not announced to do this, but we tried to organize ourselves in order to help the best we could. And yeah, we are very well prepared for a second wave now, because we have all the organizational structure now. Here we have a lot of colleagues in departments that were not working in their previously assigned jobs, but fully concentrated on helping companies in order to fill out these forms. Yeah, so in this way we are ready to assist, and this is what we do at the moment. So our whole daily business basically is on hold, and we are fully here and committed to assist the companies in filling out all these forms, getting all the information on where they can get support and financial aid from government and also from other funds. And yeah, so I'm totally involved here with all the forces we have, and we hope that we can be that we can be as of at least as helpful as we have been in the first phase. If there will be a second phase to adjust and to support everyone here. And we have really a massive amount of phone calls, of cries for help on all different channels, and we also answer on all of these channels, so via chat function, via our social media channels, telephone, email, of course, and everybody is fully focused. And on the other hand, not only in the communication with our member companies, but on the political level, we are advising all the time. We are in communication with the politicians here in the Landestag in Schleswig-Holstein on the governmental side. And one fund, for example, which was set up for companies with 10 to 50 employees, which were before not included in these help programs. They have only been, or this fund has only been established because of our communication with the politicians and because of the pressure we put on the politicians in order to not forget about this medium-sized companies who are basically like the backbone of our economy here in the northern part of Germany, since we have a lot of very small companies and not the big international players sitting here. So that was important for us, and we're gonna keep on doing this.
Can I add a small question regarding migrants? Because you underlined that there was no difference between the minority, the majority, and the German-Danish border region. But what about the migrant community?
You mean
give some examples that they suffered more than other German citizens or Danish citizens under COVID-19?
Yeah, you mean according to the crisis and the migrants who just recently came here, like from Syria and etc. That's what you mean. Yeah, we have one project as well in the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Flensburg, in the organization, that it's only focused on getting migrants into the labor market or into job. We have two colleagues here who only focus on helping them and also to get the language. How do you say that? Like language courses and stuff, and to get them into labor, especially the younger ones who are still maybe looking for an apprenticeship, and also assisting companies if they want to offer places for an apprenticeship. So a dual study, a duale Ausbildung, we call this in German. I'm not sure how to translate in English, but if you actually work in a company and go to the school at the same time, this German dual system, and we're assisting companies in preparing to get also migrants into those positions and to educate them, which is working very well, and will be also after the COVID crisis, this project will be still alive and will still be furthermore pursued. And but Günther, you're right that of course especially migrants and also the workforce that's more concentrated on the producing, on the industry sector that had to stay home, that they were affected more than people who just could sit in the home office because they couldn't just work from home. But as far as we know, this worked out quite all right, and we try to solve that with this project as well, to support companies in this regard. I don't know if this answers your question.
Thank you. Stavko, I learned last week at the conference in Klagenfurt that in the Slovene school system in Carinthia, so the bilingual school system, there were less material for Slovene pupils than for only German speakers. So these e-learning tools, and for sure we will continue to work with e-learning also in future. So I think that's one issue for the Carinthians, for the Slovenes in Carinthia. And the second one, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about the bank situation. So the backbone, or one of the backbone of the minority, is the Slovenian Bank, and I know that the owner is going to sell this bank, which is, I think, a very difficult situation for the minority in Carinthia.
I will start with this issue. We have maybe the oldest bank in Austria. It was established by our fathers in 1872, and it had this Raiffeisen idea before Raiffeisen, help for self-help. And regretfully, some of our banking managers were not very capable. Maybe some were corrupt, I don't know. But this bank was in big trouble, and was, however, saved by Raiffeisen. We are speaking of an amount most probably about 30 million. which were necessary to save this bank. And the bank is now working well. It has is turning out a good profit every year, say 2 or 3 million euro. This is not a big amount, but for a minority bank, it's quite something. Yeah. Also, the minority bank is employing some 80 people. Could be, of course, more. It was more in the past, but at least 80 people have a job with this bank. As I said, laufende Paarung, yeah, the current business is positive. We are making a profit. Regretfully, Raiffeisen Bank likes to get this money back, the 30 million. Could be more or less, but the 30 million they are trying to get back. And there are rumors that Raiffeisen will sell this Slovenian bank, minority bank, for some 60 million to a Russian investor. The Russian investor has the typical construction, as always, citizenship of Cyprus, living in London. So there are the both benefits, you know, living in European Union, working in a banking capital like London. And apparently this Russian investor is only interested in the banking license. So he would then have inside European Union a European banking license. Because, as you know, due to the Crimea issues and due to the Eastern Ukraine, there are sanctions for Russian companies, including the banks. But this one would be then a European bank with a European license from Austria, but in Russian hands. This is a situation. The bank has some 30,000 customers. It is not a big bank, but it's enough to make a good business, to make a profit. And regretfully, it's losing now sort of reputation. You know, when you speak about the bank, this is not good. The bank is living off its reputation, any bank. And this is quite a severe blow to the minority. Of course, we have protested and we have even used legal action against Raiffeisen. Maybe this will delay the sale of the bank, but I'm not sure. Maybe it will not only delay, but it will not prevent. Yeah. So this is a banking sector, and it's a pity that a Slovenian bank was not giving the possibility to buy it, a bank from Ljubljana. Apparently, there were also at least one offer from Ljubljana, but we will see. We will see. We still have some time. And hopefully this bank will remain in Carinthian Slovenian hands. Yeah. Of course, you, Günther, you could tell us more about South Tyrolean banks, about banks in the hands of Tyroleans or Raiffeisen in Tyrol or Bank of Tyrol, I don't know. But this is always an important economic factor, but also psychological, you know. If you as a minority have also your own bank, if your own bank is making a profit, then this gives you also some a different standing economically. As far as e-learning is concerned, I can't give you many details. I only know that some schools were prepared for this e-learning in an excellent way. Some others again less. We have had graduation ceremonies at the high school for the Slovenian minority, which is in Klagenfurt. There was also a graduation ceremony in a higher school for economic professions. It's in St. Jakob, outside Klagenfurt. And there is a third school, economic high school in Klagenfurt. They all had their graduation ceremonies. But about exact numbers, I can't tell you. I only know that most of those who started to graduate, who went through the process, were successful. In general terms, we have a situation in Austria as far as bilingual courts are concerned, which is not satisfactory. We have a situation as far as official language is concerned, which is not satisfactory. But as far as schools are concerned, we can say it is satisfactory. Of course, there are strong deviations as far as quality is concerned, but we have a good network of primary schools. And as I said earlier, we have also 3 high schools for the Slovenian minority. And we can say in this area, the state treaty is fulfilled and implemented in the school area. Yeah. Thank you.
So we have still some minutes and no question from the chat, and therefore I want to ask another question, but not as a representative of the Slovenes from Carinthian, but as a high representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Last week, our Minister for Integration, also Minister of Integration, suggested to Austrian citizens, sort of second, third generations, not going back their countries, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, because of COVID-19. And I think this is kind of understandable under the situations of COVID-19 and the lockdown. But on the other hand, we speak about maybe future European Union member states. And as Josefine told us, there are not only economic issues, but there are also families living in Denmark or in Germany. And the same happens to the third, second generation of Austrians. And they have the grandfathers, mothers in Bosnia somewhere. What do you think about these suggestions of our Minister for Integration?
I think there are about 500,000 people who have their roots in former Yugoslavia, amongst them many in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And as you know, also the Minister of Justice in Austria, she is from Bosnia-Herzegovina. Of course, she graduated from Columbia University, she graduated from Vienna University, and she also visited Catholic University in Piacenza. So she is quite a good lawyer and has a good reputation in Austria. But otherwise, and she also has relatives in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So these people, even if they go to Bosnia-Herzegovina, when they come back, they have to enter quarantine, you know. And this is a little bit annoying. And there was also rumors that those Bosnians, now Austrian citizens who went to Bosnia, who came back with a negative certificate, that it was not always recognized, etc. It's really a pity. Regretfully also that numbers are now increasing in Bosnia-Herzegovina. As you know, we had some religious holidays. We had the end of fasting period of Bayram in Bosnia-Herzegovina. There were some Catholic religious holidays. And people like to socialize, yeah? People like to socialize. Then there was also this other scandal of the Adria tennis tournament organized by Djokovic. And it was in Zadar and in Belgrade, and quite a few people mixed there, thousands actually, yeah? I think Djokovic had good intentions, but he was infected, his wife was infected. Their children are not infected, very strange, fortunately, of course, yeah. But yeah, the virus is spreading, and I hope it can be again put under control. And it's not nice, of course, as you said, for family members who didn't see their parents now for months and months, and this period is now being extended. Very regretfully. Yeah, so.
Thank you again also for this answer. I think we have to come to an end, and I'm the boss of Marc, and therefore I would ask also, I would ask Marc that I will not ask you any question anymore, and the final statement should be by our guest from the OSCE, Elżbieta. My last question in this seminar, webinar seminar, would be about the gender question. So we had a webinar, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, on gender issues. But my question would be more specific about women from a minority under COVID. Thank you. If you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Absolutely. Especially because women belonging to national minorities may be more susceptible to the negative effects of the economic crisis due to pre-existing structural inequalities and socially conditioned attitudes. And that's why policy responses to counter the impact of COVID-19 must incorporate a gender perspective, especially in designing social and fiscal assistance packages. And evidence across sectors demonstrate that policies, including economic planning and emergency responses that do not consult women, do not consult women's organizations, or do not include them in decision-making processes, are simply less effective. And also, I would like to make a point about the paid and unpaid care economy. This issue should be also addressed. Not only at home do women usually perform the bulk of care work, invisible and unpaid, especially during this crisis with children homeschooling with higher care needs for older persons. Also, informal economy care jobs from teachers to nurses, women are underpaid in relation to other sectors. And this requires absolutely transformative change for equality. And maybe just to conclude that gender equality and women's rights are not only human rights, but also means to achieve peace, security, stability, justice, and development.
Maybe I can add another really final question. What are the next steps of your office? So are there any plans to give publish new recommendations or to work more on the minority level? So hidden diplomacy. So what are the steps of the High Commissioner in autumn?
The mandate of the High Commissioner on National Minorities is a mandate of a quiet diplomacy toolkit. So he operates usually through personal channels, meetings, and examines firsthand the situation on the ground. And I'm sure that if the situation develops, if there will be a need for another set of recommendations, then the High Commissioner will absolutely come with this initiative.
So a very diplomatic answer, thank you. Let's come to an end. Thank you for all the panelists. I think now more or less the summer period will start. We have one final webinar next Tuesday, again at 3 o'clock. The topic is diversity governance, future post-COVID scenarios. Our second head of the institute, Joseph Marco, will be one of the panelists. This is the final webinar of the series we started 10 weeks ago. And I hope that in autumn we will meet again in real life at conferences and workshops and summer-winter schools. If the virus comes back, for sure we will continue also with webinars also in autumn. For the moment, I wish you a nice summer and nice holidays, and take care and see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.